There he is again, that old homeless guy. Probably back to beg for food. The small cafe in Greenville, Texas fell silent as the door swung open once more. A young police officer stepped in. His eyes landed on the old man's left wrist, where a faded tattoo showed a dagger piercing through an anchor. He froze. His breath caught. Then he muttered just loud enough for everyone to hear. "No way. My dad used to talk about the man with that tattoo. His name was Bill Carter. To most people in Greenville, he was just the old man with the limp. No one knew where he lived, or if he even had a home. Some said he slept behind the abandoned gas station on Route 7. Others claimed he just wandered from one bus stop to another, vanishing before sunrise. But every Sunday morning, rain, shine, or freezing wind, he came to the same cafe, ordered the cheapest cup of black coffee, and sat in the same corner table. Alone. No one really noticed that he always arrived with a small sewing kit in his coat pocket, or that after finishing his coffee, he would often stop by the park and quietly mend the shoes of children from the shelter across the street, stitching carefully, precisely, like a man trained to fix what others gave up on. The kids called him Mr. Fix-It, but never asked his name. On his left wrist was a tattoo so faded it looked almost drawn in pencil, an anchor split down the middle by a dagger. Not military regulation, not something you'd find in any textbook, but those who'd seen real war knew. Decades ago, Bill had worn a different uniform. He served as a logistics technician in a covert SEAL unit back when operations didn't make the news and heroes didn't get medals. He didn't carry a rifle into battle, but he got the right rifles to the right hands, under fire across enemy lines, with no backup and no second chances. He lost part of his right hearing in a supply drop gone wrong, lost most of his left leg on a minefield evacuation during a storm in 1972, and lost his best friend James Holloway on a mission no one was ever supposed to talk about. Since then, he never spoke about his past, never tried to explain the limp, the worn cane, the long silences. What he kept tucked inside the lining of his coat was a yellowed handkerchief, faded with time, stitched with the initials JAH. He would wipe his hands with it after helping kids fix their sneakers, or hold it for a moment before stepping into the cafe as if it gave him strength. Every year on the same Sunday, closest to a date no one else remembered, he would sit quietly, order the same coffee, and stare out the window, as if waiting, or honoring something, or someone. And every year someone at the cafe would whisper, "Why does he keep coming back?" They didn't know that the man they avoided used to be the reason others came home alive. They didn't see the history carried in his limp, the silence in his eyes, the loyalty stitched into every quiet step. But that morning, someone finally did. The bell above the door chimed faintly as Bill entered, just like every Sunday. He moved slowly, cane in one hand, paper cup of coffee in the other. A gentle nod to the barista, who offered a tight-lipped smile and looked away before he could meet her eyes. The corner table was empty, as always. He took his seat, adjusted the chair so the sunlight wouldn't hit his eyes, and placed the handkerchief on his knee like he always did. Quiet, measured, invisible, but not to everyone. 3 booths down, a young man in a pressed blazer, aviator sunglasses, perched atop his head, sat with a group of friends. He took one look at Bill and scoffed. "Here we go again," he said loudly, not bothering to lower his voice. "That fake vet is back. Someone should tell him Halloween's in October." His friends chuckled nervously. One of them, less sure of the joke, glanced at Bill and looked away quickly. The man kept going louder now. "Seriously? Does he think that sad little tattoo makes him a war hero? Probably bought it at a gas station." One of his friends gave him a look uneasy. The man in the blazer shrugged, forcing a laugh. "What I tried to serve got turned away." "Heart murmur," they said. "Guess some of us just dress the part, huh?" He sipped his drink, but there was bitterness in the way he set it down. Bill didn't move. He just lifted the coffee to his lips, hands, steady eyes, unfazed. The cafe owner, a woman in her early 30s named Mallory, approached with forced politeness. Her voice was soft but firm. "Sir, we've had a few complaints this morning," she began, not quite meeting his eyes. "Would you mind finishing your drink outside, just for today?" Silence fell across the room. Even the espresso machine seemed to hold its breath. Bill gave a faint nod, the kind that said, "I've heard worse." He folded the handkerchief carefully, slid it back into his coat pocket, and reached for his cane. A toddler at a nearby table asked his mother, "Why is that man walking funny?" The mother leaned in, whispering harshly, "Don't stare, honey. He's just one of those people." Bill made his way to the door, slowly, deliberately. Every step an echo of pain swallowed long ago. He struggled to balance his cane coffee and dignity all at once. The man in the blazer couldn't resist one more jab. "If he's a SEAL," he sneered, "then I'm the President of the United States." Laughter followed. This time louder, more confident, like they'd won something. No one intervened. No one said a word. Bill reached the door and nudged it open with his shoulder. The cold air outside greeted him with more kindness than the people inside had. Back at the counter, the barista noticed something. A $5 bill carefully folded, tucked beneath the sugar jar. Next to it, a napkin with handwriting so neat it looked almost practiced. "Thanks for the last cup. That's all I needed." She didn't understand what it meant. Not yet. He took a seat at the far end of the patio, away from the windows, away from the whispers. His coffee had gone lukewarm. The metal chair bit into his back. Inside, life went on orders, called out lattes, served conversations, resumed. But the room didn't feel the same. The barista kept glancing out the window, her hands trembling slightly as she steamed milk. She had only worked here 2 weeks, but something about the way that man walked, the way he held himself after being humiliated, it didn't sit right. And that's when the door opened again. Not loudly, but with presence. A young police officer stepped inside, uniform still crisp from a morning patrol. His name was Thomas Hayes. 28, raised in Greenville, respected, calm. He scanned the cafe briefly, then stopped, eyes fixed on the patio outside. On Bill, more specifically on Bill's left wrist. His breath hitched. The tattoo. It was real. Not just real, but familiar. Thomas had seen it before. Not on a person, but in a photo his father kept in a locked drawer. A black and white image from the 1970s. 8 young men standing beside a dusty transport plane, arms around each other. All wearing gear. All grinning despite the mud, the blood, the exhaustion. And on one man's wrist, barely visible, a dagger piercing through an anchor. His father used to tell him bedtime stories, but not fairy tales, no dragons, no castles. He told him about the man with the map in his head, a tech officer who'd memorized entire terrains, who'd led a team out of a minefield under mortar fire, who refused a medal and disappeared after the war. He told it like a myth, like a ghost story. But he always said, "If you ever see that tattoo, shake that man's hand, because you owe him everything." Thomas blinked, heart pounding, then stepped forward. He didn't walk to the counter, didn't greet anyone. He just pointed to the door and muttered just loud enough, "No way." My dad used to talk about the man with that tattoo. The cafe went still. Forks hovered mid-air. A phone call was left unanswered. Even the man in the blazer turned slowly, frowning. Thomas pushed the door open and stepped outside. Toward Bill. Toward the man who had saved his father's life. And toward a truth that was about to shatter everything that cafe thought it knew. The door closed softly behind Officer Thomas Hayes as he stepped onto the patio. Bill didn't look up. He was focused on wiping the rim of his cup with the handkerchief as he always did. A gesture of habit, of ritual, Sir Thomas said quietly. Bill turned eyebrows raised slightly, not in fear but in the wary patience of someone who'd been misunderstood too many times. Thomas hesitated. Then, with measured calm, he asked, "Were you?" "With SEAL Team Bravo, the old logistics unit out of Subic." Bill blinked. A pause. Then a small nod. "Long time ago," he said. "Doesn't matter now." Thomas drew in a breath. His voice lowered thick with something he hadn't expected emotion. "My father was Sergeant Daniel Hayes. He used to tell me about you. Called you the Quiet Map. Said you saved his life, and 6 others." Bill's hand trembled slightly as he placed the handkerchief back into his coat pocket. "I remember Danny," he said softly. "He liked black coffee with way too much sugar." A beat of silence passed between them, thick with memory, gratitude, and the ache of time. Inside, people were peeking through the window. The man in the blazer had stopped mid-sentence, his smug smile now faltering. Thomas turned toward the glass, looked at everyone inside. His next steps were calm, deliberate. He re-entered the cafe not with aggression, but with certainty. The same certainty his father must have had that day in the jungle, trusting a quiet tech officer with their lives. Thomas stood in the center of the cafe and raised his voice, not loud, but unmistakable. "This man, sitting outside," he said, "is the reason my father came home alive." People shifted in their seats. He continued. He didn't wear medals. He didn't brag. He didn't ask for discounts or sympathy. He walked into a minefield when everyone else ran. "And I exist because of him." He turned toward the man in the blazer. "Do you still think that tattoo came from a gas station?" The man's lips parted, but no sound came out. Thomas didn't wait for a reply. He addressed the room again. "If anyone here feels uncomfortable because a hero is drinking coffee in peace, you're free to step outside." No one moved. A frail elderly woman slowly stood from her booth and clapped. Once, then twice. Others followed. Not in a burst of applause, but in quiet, almost reverent solidarity. The barista set down a tray of drinks and wiped her eyes. Mallory, the owner, stepped forward, face pale. "Officer, I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Thomas replied gently. "And neither did I. Until today." Outside, Bill was still seated, gazing out at the road beyond the parking lot. As if none of this mattered. As if the past had already taught him how to carry silence with grace. But when Thomas sat down across from him, removed his cap, and said, "Thank you, Sir," Bill simply nodded, and said, "One man remembered." That's enough. No one touched their coffee. Inside the Sunnyside Cafe, the air had turned thick, not with steam or the scent of cinnamon rolls, but with the weight of realization. The man in the blazer, once so loud, sat frozen, his fingers clenched around his latte cup like it might shatter. His face had gone pale. He looked as if he wanted to vanish into the leather cushions. His friends avoided his eyes. It was no longer just about a tattoo, or a man sitting outside. It was about what they had said, what they hadn't done, and who they had decided he was, without asking a single question. The elderly woman who had started the applause walked up to the counter. She asked the barista if she could send out a hot breakfast plate, "The best you've got, please," and pay for it herself. No fanfare, no charity, just a plate of food owed far too long. Others followed her lead. A man in work boots slipped a folded note to the cashier with $20 and said, "Make sure he gets coffee here for the rest of the month. And don't tell him it's from me." A high schooler sitting with his mom wiped his eyes with his sleeve and whispered, "Is he?" like the guys we read about in history class. His mother nodded slowly. Better, because he never asked to be remembered. Outside, Thomas and Bill sat quietly. No camera, no podium. Just two men, one old, one young, bound by a story, passed down through silence and scars. Back inside, Mallory, still reeling from her own shame, walked to the door, hesitating before stepping out. She clutched a receipt in one hand, her fingers trembling. "Mr. Carter," she said gently, "your meal today is on the house, and I'd be honored if you came back. Any time, as often as you like." Bill looked at her. His expression didn't change, but his eyes, blue and quiet like the sky before a storm, softened just slightly. "No need for special treatment," he said. "I just came to remember a friend." Mallory nodded, not trusting herself to speak further. From his booth, the man in the blazer slowly stood up. His sunglasses were gone, his cocky smirk replaced by something hollow. He walked toward the counter, placed a $100 bill on the register, and said softly, "For the man outside, for what I said, I was wrong." He didn't wait for change. He didn't look back. As he passed Thomas, he paused. Thomas looked at him, but said nothing. Some mistakes don't need lectures, just silence deep enough to let guilt settle. That afternoon, the news hadn't picked up the story. No journalists came. No viral video captured the moment. But the next morning, a small flyer was taped to the cafe window. It showed a rough sketch of the dagger and anchor tattoo hand-drawn in pencil. Underneath it, only 5 words: "Respect the ones who remember." And from that day on, things shifted. The corner table wasn't empty anymore. Veterans started showing up. Not all wore uniforms. Not all looked the part. But the cafe had seen enough to know appearances mean little. A woman with burn scars down her neck began stopping by. A man with trembling hands helped clear dishes without being asked. Nobody needed to say who they were. They were seen now. No questions, no pity. Just space, just coffee, just peace. And Bill, he came back the next Sunday. Same coat, same coffee, same seat. Only this time, when he walked in, the door opened wider, and someone held it for him. Bill never told war stories. He didn't need to. The past had a way of following him, etched into the rhythm of his limp, the stiffness of his silence, the way he folded that old handkerchief before every meal. But if someone had asked if they had really listened, here's what they might have seen. The jungle was dense, air thick like syrup. Radio static cracked through the noise, broken, panicked voices trying to coordinate an extraction. SEAL Team Bravo wasn't supposed to be there that long. The drop had gone wrong. Maps were off. Reinforcements delayed. It was raining hard. Mud everywhere. The kind that swallows boots whole and hides the glint of metal beneath the soil. Don't move. But it was too late. The explosion hit like a punch from below. Dirt and fire and screaming. Bill flew 10 feet, landed hard on his side, ears ringing. He looked down, his leg was mangled blood pouring into the earth. But he didn't scream. He didn't freeze. He reached for his pack, pulled out the coordinates from memory, grabbed the broken radio, bypassed the shorted circuit. "This is Bravo Echo. Coordinates 16.221 minus 104.73. We need birds now. Repeat birds now." He could barely hear the acknowledgement through the noise. Someone dragged him behind cover. "James," he asked, voice cracking. A medic shook his head. A black bag lay still nearby. Bill turned away, gritted his teeth. Looked at the team, some wounded, Some dazed one boy, barely 19, trying to hold his own arm together. He didn't cry. Not then. He just pulled the handkerchief from James's pack, bloodied embroidered with JH, and tied it around his thigh as a tourniquet. The helicopter came 30 minutes later. Bill was still barking coordinates when they lifted off. He passed out with the map still clenched in his hand. He never got a medal. The mission was never declassified. The letters stopped coming after discharge. The government moved on. But Bill never forgot. Each year on the week James died, he found a place to sit alone. Not for recognition. Not for free meals. Just to remember a man who didn't make it out. A promise was made in that jungle. If we get home, I'm buying the first cup of real coffee. Bill kept that promise, even if he had to drink it alone, even if no one else knew what it meant. Back in the present, as Bill watched the people move inside the café, he reached into his coat and pulled out that same handkerchief, yellowed, threadbare, stained with memories. He didn't unfold it, just held it quietly for a moment, then placed it back in his pocket. That night, under a street lamp outside the shelter, Bill sat on a bench alone. The wind rustled leaves at his feet. The town had gone quiet. He pulled the handkerchief from his pocket again, slowly this time, held it up to the light, stared at the faded initials, like they still spoke to him. His eyes glistened, but no tear fell. Just the faintest breath, a whisper into the night. I kept my end, James. Some stories didn't need telling, because some memories were never meant to fade. Later that week, Bill came back. Same time, same coat, same seat by the window. But something was different. The young barista, her name tag read, Anna walked over slowly, a plate of warm biscuits in her hand. Her expression was unsure, like she was working up the courage to ask something that had weighed on her for days. Mr. Carter, she said softly, placing the plate in front of him. I hope you don't mind. I, looked up the patch. The tattoo, I mean. Bill glanced at her, curious but calm. I didn't find much, she added quickly, but I showed it to my grandmother, and she went completely still. Bill tilted his head. My grandmother's name is Margaret Holloway. She continued, her voice trembling slightly. Her husband was James Holloway. She said he served in a SEAL unit, but never came home. Bill froze. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup. She kept this, Anna said, reaching into her apron pocket. She pulled out a small, creased photograph, the kind printed on matte paper, corners curling from time and touch. 8 young men, dusty boots, grins that cut through the grime, arms slung over each other like brothers. Bill stared at it. His voice came low, hoarse. That's James. Anna nodded. She said she only had this one photo. It came back with a letter. But the letter didn't say how he died, just that it was fast and brave. Bill exhaled slowly. He looked at Anna, really looked at her. Same eyes, same kindness in the face. Like James had passed something forward even in silence. He wasn't supposed to go first, Bill murmured. We flipped a coin, you know, for who'd take point. Anna blinked. He never talked about any of that. He couldn't, Bill said. None of us could. There was a long pause between them. Then Bill reached into his coat, pulled out the old handkerchief, placed it gently on the table. He used to carry this, he said. It was his. I just held on to it. Figured someone should. Anna stared at the faded initials JH stitched in uneven thread. Her fingers hovered above it, then slowly closed around the fabric like it was glass. Can I? She whispered. Can I bring this to her? Bill nodded. She waited a long time, he said. Maybe it's time to bring him home. It started with a photo. Anna shared it on a local veterans forum, a snapshot of the handkerchief, folded neatly beside a black and white image of her grandfather and his team. No names, no dramatic caption. Just 5 simple words. He kept his friend's promise. By the next morning, the cafe was full, but not the usual weekend crowd. Men and women with caps embroidered with forgotten unit numbers. Some walked with canes. Some wore old boots. Most said nothing at all. They didn't come to take selfies or record TikToks. They came to sit. Some sat in Bill's corner quietly sipping their coffee. Others sat outside where Bill had once been asked to leave. The cafe changed without anyone saying it out loud. Mallory added a small wooden sign above the booth, reserved for the quiet ones. The dagger and anchor symbol was burned into the wood by hand. Thomas, the young officer, came by every Sunday. He wasn't on duty. Not to be seen. Just to listen. And Anna Shee started something called Morning Bench. Every Friday, a long wooden table was set up outside the cafe. Free coffee, no questions asked. But it wasn't charity. It was recognition served hot. There were no speeches, no flyers, no corporate sponsors, just warmth and space. People began bringing small things to contribute: a box of fresh socks, a crate of old books, even a shoe shine kit, because someone remembered how Bill used to fix kids' shoes by hand. The mayor of Greenville stopped by one afternoon, not with a proclamation, but with a question. What do you need? And for once, the answer wasn't silence. A local carpenter offered to build a new bench, engraved with the names of silent veterans. A high school history teacher invited Bill to speak to her class. He declined, but sent Anna instead, holding the photo, the handkerchief, and a story. It wasn't viral, but it spread. And somewhere in that quiet ripple of acknowledgement, Bill smiled more. He still came every Sunday, still ordered the same black coffee. But now the door stayed open longer when he walked in, and someone always was waiting to sit beside him. Bill Carter passed away 3 years later. No announcement, no headlines, just a quiet morning when he didn't show up to his usual seat. Thomas was the first to notice. He knocked on the shelter's back door where Bill sometimes stayed. The staff only shook their heads. They'd found him in his cot, peaceful hands folded, the handkerchief resting on his chest. He hadn't left a will. No family. No possessions apart from the clothes he wore and a tin box with the photo of his SEAL team, a folded map, and one final note I remembered. That was enough. But Greenville didn't let him fade into silence. At his funeral, the small church overflowed. Veterans in worn jackets stood shoulder to shoulder with cafe regulars, teenagers, teachers, first responders. No one used microphones. No one read his resume. They didn't have to. Thomas delivered the only eulogy, short and steady. He never asked to be remembered. But he made sure no one was forgotten. Bill was buried at the edge of a local veterans' plot, next to a soldier whose grave had remained unvisited for decades. The town placed a bronze plaque at his resting place, a dagger piercing an anchor, and beneath it, for the one who walked quietly, so others could come home. The street where the cafe stood was renamed Carter Way. No ribbon cutting. Just a new sign placed at sunrise while the cafe opened for the day's first brew. Every year on the Sunday closest to his passing, people still gather at the morning bench. They don't talk much. They just sit, drink coffee, and remember the man who kept showing up even when the world looked away. Maybe you've walked past someone like Bill Carter. Maybe they didn't have medals, or a parade, or a place to belong. But maybe they were the reason someone else got to come home. The reason someone like you was even born. So the next time you see someone sitting alone, ask yourself, are they forgotten? Or are we just not looking closely enough? Because some heroes don't speak. Some heroes don't shine. They just endure quietly. And sometimes, that's the kind that saves us all. Have you ever looked away from someone who might have once saved everything?